So we're about to demonstrate our radio button demo, and it's going to extend the checkbox demo that we just finished looking at just a while ago. So here once again is the code for the checkbox demo, just to show you that it hasn't been altered. It's the original code that we just finished looking at. So I'm going to close this up. We don't need to look at it again. Here is the new demo. So we have a bunch of imports on the top, and notice what's happening here. Public class. This should say radio button demo, but just because of the way I'm demonstrating these things, I'm just going to call it demo. But it extends the checkbox demo, which we saw some time ago. And again, we're going to override the getPane method that's in the superclass, namely in the checkbox demo. So remember, the getPane method there, or class, already overrode the getPane from the previous demo, and now we're actually two ancestors below this time. So this is now we're now the child of the original demo. We make this protected. So what do you think's coming in the future? Well, I guess we're going to be extending this yet again to yet another demo. So we start by executing all the normal code that would have been done in our superclass, and you'll recall in turn it's going to do the same thing to its superclass. So we do all the stuff in the original oldest getPane, and then we do the stuff in the next not so oldest getPane, and then we come here and we continue to do even more stuff yet. So in other words, we're obviously going to get the same interface that we have already been playing with in the previous demos, but we're now going to add yet a new piece to it. Remember, there was a border pane where the interface was designed, the one we just finished looking at. And remember what we had? There was a string of text in the center part of the border pane. There was nothing in the top part, and there still won't be. On the right side, we wound up putting eventually two checkboxes. On the bottom of the border pane, we had our left and right buttons. Remember, in turn, they were inside of an H box. And now, on the left part of the border pane, we're going to put a couple of radio buttons that will control the color of the text. We're going to throw them into a V box, and they'll be presented vertically, and we will see three radio buttons. They will be grouped together so that they become mutually exclusive. In other words, they're going to have labels red, green, and blue, and it won't be possible to make the text red and green at the same time, or green and blue, or all three. Rather, we can only select one of those primary colors at a time, because these are radio buttons and they've been grouped to act as radio buttons, so only one single selection at a time is going to be allowed. So let's look at how we put the radio buttons together then. Well, as I said, we're going to put them in a V box so they'll appear vertically. We're going to call the V box a pane for the radio buttons. We're going to use a vertical gap of 20 in our V box. We're going to make a nice little border around the pane of 555, top, left, right, and bottom. And then we're going to set the style for our radio buttons so that they have a border color of green around the V box, not around the actual buttons. And then we're going to define the buttons here. Note again, we're using the convention introduced by the author, RB for radio buttons. So we have RB red, RB green, and RB blue. And those are our three radio buttons. In each case, we say new radio button, and we give a string of text to go with the button. In this case, red, this case, green, and this case, blue. We then add them to our V box that we've already made, which was called pane for radio buttons, and we do that by saying pane for radio buttons dot get children dot add all, and then we add them in the order we want them to appear in our V box from top to bottom. So the red button will be on the top, the blue button will be on the bottom, and the green button right here is going to be in the middle. And then we take what we've put together now, this pane for the radio buttons containing these three vertically stacked radio buttons, and we drop it into the left side of our border pane where everything else has gone. So now it's ready to use pretty much, but we need to first of all make sure we have that mutual exclusivity between those radio buttons, and we get that by putting them in what's called a toggle group. So here we create a toggle group called group, and there it is. And then we put those buttons in that toggle group by saying red button, or RB radio button red dot set toggle group and then group. And then we do the same with the green and the blue. So this will put all three in the same toggle group. And because they're in a toggle group, selecting one will automatically unselect the other ones, the other two in this case. Now, here is the code we defined to act when these buttons are clicked. So for the red button, we say rbred.setOnAction, and we use lambda notation. And then we ask the question, is the RB red selected? And if it's true that it is, then we're going to fill the button with, we're going to fill the text with the color red. So in other words, this is going to change the text color to red whenever we select the red button. Because they're in a toggle group, the selection and unselection of each button will be automatic. In other words, we don't need to write any code to make it so that clicking on the red unselects the green and blue. The toggle group handles that under the covers all by itself for us without us having to worry about that. All we need to do is check which one button has been selected. So we also then move on to the green button and see if it's the one that's been selected. So rbgreen.setOnAction, lambda notation, if statement, if the green button is selected, then set the fill color of the text to green. And finally, we do the same with the blue button, setting the text fill to blue. And after we finished all that stuff, we return pane to the caller. Looks like yet again I've left this little piece of spurious code that we don't need, so we might as well just get rid of that. All right, that concludes our step through the code. Now let's run it and see what happens. Of course, all the other UI controls that were already there, that we already exercised, should continue to work and do exactly what they did in the past. We haven't changed any of that, but we've added 3 new buttons now, and we want to demonstrate first of all that they do control the text as prescribed, the text color, and also that they do have that mutual exclusive property so that when we click on one, all the others become unclicked. So let's try it out and see what happens. So there we are. As promised, it has all the features it used to have. Piece of text in what is the center part of the border pane, buttons down in the bottom part, checkboxes on the left, nothing on top, and on the right the checkboxes, and finally on the left we have the 3 new buttons. Well, let's make sure all the other stuff still works. So I can move the text left and right. I can make it italics and bold or just bold or nothing. Now let's try the new buttons out. So if I click on red, sure enough it becomes red. Now hopefully when I click on green, the red button will become unselected, and it does. And of course we get green text now. Blue makes it blue. So you see that I can't select 2 buttons at the same time because they're mutually exclusive. On the other hand, you saw that I can check 2 boxes at the same time. That's allowed. Now, one final point about using a toggle group to enforce this mutual exclusion. You might get the bright idea that that could work with checkboxes as well, and somehow we could just sort of repeat the syntax that you see here but apply it to the checkboxes instead of the radio buttons. It's a nice idea, but if you attempt to do that, you'll actually get an error message that says set toggle group is not defined for checkbox. So you can't do it. This set toggle group isn't going to work on checkboxes, but it will work quite nicely on radio buttons.